And we are live. Welcome to the first episode of Scandi Pitches. Scandi singers talk singing. How are you, Therese?
Yeah, I'm all right, thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. So for those of you
Missing singing together.
Oh yeah, so much. For those of you who don't maybe follow my other YouTube material, my name is Knut, and I'm a composer, arranger, and singer and piano player. And I mostly work with a cappella music and choirs. And I've worked with Therese for many, many years. So what sort of stuff do you do, Therese?
Oh my God, I hate introducing myself. I was really scared that you were going to ask me to do that.
Okay.
I need to actually come up with a proper answer for it. But I do a lot of things. I sing a lot with you. We've worked together for many years, as you say. But I also do a lot of production work, both in theater. I make shows as a writer and director, and sometimes I write music for the shows. I often put a lot of songs, and in my latest piece that you were in, I also had a lot of a cappella jingles. And basically I just try and get as much singing in my life as I can in whatever I do.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it's we've done some theatre work together, and we've basically my connection's unstable. We'll see. I hope it holds up. But yeah, so we've talked about doing some sort of podcast thing for a while, so we thought we'd give it a go. And the first thing we wanted to talk about is, why do people sing together? I mean, it's kind of, considering how big a role music and singing plays in our society, it's actually kind of interesting to think, well, why is that? Why do we sing together? Like, it seems kind of a bit strange to try and think about. But we thought we'd look at some maybe reasons why that could be. So
Delve deeper into the subject.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, it all started with the question, why do we sing together?
Yeah, and
that's a whole other kind of worms.
Yeah, I mean, we're also professional singers, and so it kind of makes sense in that sense. But I certainly do.
Yeah, we sing together because we get paid to sing together, but we often elect to sing together as well. So
I wouldn't sing with you if it weren't for the fact that I got paid. No, I mean, I actually... So, Therese, you've been singing in choirs and, basically singing, in general for your whole life, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. According to my mom, I actually started singing before I could talk. And I started talking around 1. So I don't remember a time where I haven't been singing. There's no sort of answer to when I started singing. But singing with other people, like deliberately going to sing with other people, not just the sort of nursery, everybody sing together because that's just what we do. I think I started singing in a choir when I was 8. And then I've never not sung in a choir.
Yeah.
And I think I've also noticed a lot of connections with singing in a group or singing in general. Singing with other people has been very strongly linked to my general well-being and mental health. And as a general rule, I'm kind of okay if I've got people to sing with. And,
Yeah, it's interesting you say
otherwise,
that.
Who knows? I don't want to test.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, we'll get to because I did a bit of research, because that's what I do. I like to do research and look at history, and we'll get to this exact thing. Now, I actually got into choral singing quite late comparatively. While I had done sort of solo singing from my late teens onwards, I was very bad. I was listening back to recordings of me is not a pleasant experience, but of course I take this kind of stuff very seriously. So I've done everything I could to improve. But I actually really started getting into choral singing at my last year of university. So I was already quite old, as far as being in your mid-20s could qualify as being old. But I kind of have the...
That's a new ask.
Well, it's a very different perspective from yours because I got into it late and probably for quite different reasons. I got into it kind of because I had an assessment in college where we had to write a piece, or we got to write a piece for professional choral singers. And it was the most exciting thing when I was rehearsing those singers and they were singing. I could not have predicted just how great it was going to sound. And I think just that experience really got me into choral singing, listening to really, really good choral singers. But of course now, I've done it professionally for years and years, and got to conduct great singers and write for great singers, and I run a whole YouTube channel on choral singing. So clearly, it really captivated me and has become a big part of my life. And of course, I've met some of my greatest friends through choral singing, like say you.
Yay.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's the thing as well, isn't it? Like the sort of apart from the fact that people do genuinely get into choirs because of like for mental health reasons, a lot of it is a social thing, and it's a way to meet people through a common interest, and you sort of launched into getting to know people very well. I think there's a certain level of generosity with sharing your voice with other people in the company of other people, sharing their voices and making music together. It's a very sort of, it's a strange level of intimacy, but sometimes you're launched into doing that with complete strangers and you kind of suddenly feel like you know each other pretty well.
Yeah, it's really,
without having to do the hard work.
Without having to actually talk to people. It's interesting. Well, let's dive into it then. Now, because I really like to look at history and I always try to do a bit of historical research for my Choir with Knut videos, I thought I'd look at what kind of role has communal singing played throughout the development of, human civilization. And it's actually what I found, it seems to indicate that singing has basically been a very, very important part of society from the very start. So it's said, now this was actually found in a study just a few years ago, 2017 is when scientists gauged that the modern human kind of separated from the other, relatives of the human species. They say that happened about 350,000 years ago, at the latest. Like, imagine, we count prehistoric times to start before like ancient Egypt, and that's like 3000 BC. So you can imagine we're talking about not just a few thousand years, like hundreds of thousands of years before that. It's just amazing. That's when our body would have like been capable to produce the same sounds as it can do now. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and would that have been like, would that have been just sort of replicating sounds from nature and things like that? Or is there a sort of, do people think that there is a sense of like community? Like, was it sort of communal singing and for the purpose of making those sounds? Does anyone know?
Well, it's interesting because a big problem we have when we look at really, really old prehistoric times is that there isn't a lot of written history. Once we get to, say, ancient Egypt and ancient Greece, we certainly have written language, which helps a lot. But of course, archaeologists have to kind of look at what kind of remains do we find. So what I'm talking about is at this point we know that that humans were capable of singing, and now when we get to, say, ancient Egypt, so 3000 BC, music was a really important part of ritual. So they used it for magic, and they used it for in ceremonies for their Egyptian gods, and it was quite an important part of their culture. And you can when you look at, say, ancient Greece, and that's so about 1000 BC, it was such an ingrained part of their society. So they would have different types of songs that they would use for different types of ceremonies, whether it be, this god or that purpose. They all had distinct genre, if you will, of singing, communal singing. And
the chorus in Greek drama.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, that was such an ingrained part of their society. So one could assume that didn't just spring out of nowhere. That was probably a continuation of existing traditions. So we do know that it happened in prehistoric Egypt. And that by the time we get to ancient Greece, communal singing was a huge deal. Very often tied to religion. So I actually found in a lot of languages, the word for music basically is really closely associated with dancing, religion, and cults. So it serves a very, ritualistic purpose, if you will. And it's not unreasonable to think that this might be the case for, prehistoric humans as well. And I found an interesting article. This was from 2000, Miller, 2000, Evolution of Human Music Through Sexual Selection, where they suggest that being able to do, musical displays such as singing and dancing would be a way of, would be part of natural selection, because you could indicate to a potential mate that you're fit, you're physically, suitable for, creating offspring with. And we see this in other animals.
What, because of the noise you're able to make?
No, just because it's so. In terms of evolution, singing and dancing doesn't really serve a practical purpose as such. It's not an obvious thing. Like you chew to eat food, and you go to the toilet to get rid of waste and stuff. Singing and dancing is more like an extra thing. So why would we do it? And then it's this guy or this person. I don't know whether it was a man or woman. They suggest that much like in other species, it's a part of courtship. You're trying to demonstrate to other humans that you're physically fit, you're suitable for for creating offspring.
No, well that makes sense. Like the birdies.
Yeah, exactly. And with birds, you find they will have a very complex system of calls that they use. And they use it just for communication as well, but they use it to court. Okay, so we see that there has been a really long tradition of communal singing in history, since prehistoric history, but we don't know for certain since prehistoric Egypt. Now, I did find a lot of materials that would tie it up with religion. So you see in a lot of religious ceremonies, singing is involved.
Yeah, and that's not so strange, because that's I think a lot of countries, probably a lot of cultures, when we think of choir as a concept, a lot of people's minds go to church. And I mean, certainly in Sweden, where I'm from, which
sorry, where are you from?
Yeah.
which show is this?
No, but in Sweden, choir singing in a choir is literally the biggest hobby, and it's such a big deal. And people are into watching choirs, people singing choirs. I think the Swedish, and across the Swedish church, there are more than 5,000 choirs that are just connected to the church. So that's not even taking into account all the other ones. And I certainly grew up singing in my choirs at the local church. That was the closest choir I had. And I think also it's interesting with Sweden that choir singing is so big, because actually as secular as I think we like to think we are in Sweden, church and the tradition of church and church going is quite firmly integrated into just culture and general life. So it's it's not a strange thing for a Swedish person to have spent a lot of time in churches. And even when we move abroad, we have the Swedish church is quite a big deal internationally as well. But no, I mean, certainly here as well, I think there's a Swedish church in London, which I do quite a lot of singing work with as well. And we just it's our first point of contact when moving to a new country a lot of the time. We gather in the church because they have the coffee that we like and the cinnamon buns that we like, but also a sense of the sort of familiarity with the Swedish church, which is kind of the same everywhere. But also I think, it's just interesting how it's tied to that sort of, I mean, singing in a group is both somehow, it can so easily be very sacred and very sort of official and formal, and it can be, we do it in the most sort of formal, serious occasions that we have, but at the same time, it's also on the other end of the spectrum. It's what we do when we're at our jolliest, as it were. So like, I mean, certainly in Sweden, like schnapps songs and the culture of singing at big meals on holidays when you're absolutely plastered and continuing to drink as you sing. But yeah, it's nice. It's I think there's never an excuse not to sing together, really.
Yeah. And this is
some places.
This is basically what we see in ancient Greece as well. 2,000-3,000 years before, you see people singing for religious ceremony and also for partying, literally. They're drinking to Dionysus and they're singing about it. It's really interesting. And what I wonder is when did people kind of realize that singing and kind of having some sort of communal thing would work so well together? Because you see, I mean, you look at, say, like early Christian religious ceremonies, they also involved. So I mean, that's where the first kind of standardized music in Europe is the plain chant. Yeah. It was religious, and it was serving a role in the community for ceremony, for we're going to church. And I wonder,
and in some cases was it also reserved for religious ceremony, as in you shouldn't really sing outside of religious ceremony?
I'm not sure.
I feel like I've heard that in places.
It could be. I mean,
I might have heard it from Sound of Music as well.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I would be surprised if people didn't sing outside of church. I think it certainly was, we find a very standardized kind of music within the church. But certainly, I mean, folk music has been around for a long time, and, that would be happening. I know for, say, Renaissance music, for instance, this was back when women weren't allowed to sing in the church. They were still perfectly fine to go and sing, madrigals. That wasn't looked down upon. Yeah. So, they did have a kind of an allowable, and I didn't like to say that, but that was when music were also, or women were also allowed to take part in the music making. So it's I'd be surprised if you didn't have communal singing outside of that, but maybe it wasn't as well documented, though of course it's not something I'm an expert on, the music making in the Dark Ages in Europe. But go on.
It must have always been there. Sorry, I'm just talking. It's so glitchy, so I don't know if I'm talking over you or not.
Oh, that's fine.
It's I don't know. I think it's just it feels like such a natural thing to sort of have for humans to always have sort of solace in as well. Mm-hmm. And it's the sort of natural instinct of like singing lullabies as well, and storytelling through music, which was the way people remembered a story about something. Like it was kind of before writing was a thing, then song was the communication medium for history, and how history was documented a lot of the time, because it's easier to remember a song than a big chunk of text.
It used to be, I forget exactly when this was, but you certainly had a time in history when news were distributed by song. So that'd be the town crier would sing the news, precisely because it was easier to remember.
God, I wish Boris Johnson would do that in his.
What, you want to hear Boris Johnson sing?
Well, I don't know. He might have a fantastic singing voice.
Yeah,
don't all Eton boys have like?
I don't know. But it's fun. Bring back singing news. It'd be quite a fun thing to do. But it's. I actually found an article. I mean, this was not. They couldn't claim that this was the case in all cultures, because it's not. But the way that parents speak to their children or babies. Little baby, da, 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 that kind of talking. Parentese, as it's called.
Some parents do, yeah.
Yeah, some parents. Actually, I found an interesting article from 2000 saying that this might actually have been part of development of the singing between mother and child as a way of bonding and for them to learn language and stuff. And that's could very well have been part of communal singing from prehistoric times, within cultures where you do baby talk. And so it's still, it certainly happens in the English speaking world still, where you would speak to your children in a sort of sing-songy way, where you have fluctuating pitch, and it's almost a bit like you're singing. As you say, lullabies will kind of serve a similar kind of purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose as well, though, lullabies are more a sort of soothing thing. It's about getting the baby not to communicate and to shut up and go to sleep. Whereas the sort of sing-songy, oh, how are you today? Oh, you look so lovely, da, da, da. Like that sort of thing is more like a sort of trying to engage in communication with the baby. So it is a sort of means of communication. And I suppose that sort of style of talking or talk singing is also what most generates a reaction in a baby. They might look at you a bit more, they might laugh a little bit, they might jodel along. Yeah,
and certainly within countries where people do parentese speaking, it is actually shown that babies do react more to that kind of speaking. They'll know that it's directed at them. But I think babies have a tendency to tune out when we talk like we're doing now in sort of a monotone. Babies have a tendency to tune that out. But the second you go up in pitch, and then it grabs their attention more. And this is, and I should say that there has been some criticism of this, that it doesn't apply to every culture. But I thought it was an interesting take anyway, that it seems that this kind of up talking, baby talk can, play a role in the development of singing.
Do you think it might have to do with like variation and hearing and like being exposed to hearing the voice do different pitches? Because presumably babies will also hear their parents speaking at their normal speaking pitch. So maybe that sort of exposure to the certain use of the voice and the pitch moving in different directions as you speak is quite, I mean, that might help. I mean, they say a lot of I mean, it's said a lot that Swedish people or people who have Swedish as their first language, that singing is quite a natural thing, which I don't think is just which is said a lot. It's not just to do with the fact that we just do it all the bloody time from a really early age. And it's such a big part of like what we do in schools as well. Like there's nobody who gets away with not singing. But because of Swedish being quite a melodic language and because of the pitch being quite flexible as we speak.
As we speak like in Swedish, when we go a bit up and down.
As we speak in Swedish.
We go a little bit up
but
and
like
down.
And being quite a neutral language as well that sort of adapts itself. Maybe it's something to do with we just naturally speak.
Yeah.
In ways that kind of suit singing as well. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's very long-winded.
You've lived in other countries and engaged in their choral culture as well. Could you tell us a bit more about, say, when you went to Georgia? How was it like there?
So I went to Georgia for a few weeks when I was doing my master's, my postgraduate in actually physical theatre, but a big part of it was to study Georgian polyphony as a kind of specialism, and Georgian theatre traditions as well. But obviously a big part of Georgian theatre tradition is Georgian polyphony. And I think it's commonly accepted that like Georgian polyphony is kind of like the earliest form of polyphonic singing. Probably, I'm sure there's like variations, but the thing that I found quite interesting as well is that it predates Christianity. So the tradition of polyphonic singing was there before religion, and at the same time, Georgia is a very religious country, or a very godly country, and there is like many people who I met there and sang with there also did say that kind of, I mean, almost like all the singing is somehow in honor of God, whether you do it in a field, at a dinner table, or in a church. And it was just so, the singing was so integrated in kind of everything in the whole culture, actually quite similar to Sweden, the sort of tradition of singing together at dinner, or like someone, but much more advanced than Sweden, because we have our set of drinking songs that we sing, whereas sitting at a dinner table, Exactly. Let's not do that one. Maybe at the end of this episode we can attempt it. But no, I mean, but completely different experience from sort of sitting at a big like feast, the Georgian supra, which is a big feast, and coming together with its own sort of set rules and rituals, where all of a sudden, like, anyone can just start singing, and everyone who knows the song, which is kind of mostly everyone, because there's nearly always a drone type, a lower voice part in the what's mostly a 3-part harmony. So everybody just joins in the singing.
And they all know the music.
Yeah. Sorry?
And they all know the music from before.
Pretty much, like a lot of the time in the places that we went to, yeah. But if you don't, you don't, and those who know it sing it, and the rest are kind of, are still involved in it, and a lot of it is quite easy to pick up as well, depending on depending on what it is. Sometimes you absolutely can't, but and some of it comes with dances and sort of repetitive singing with dancing and clapping, and it's just I don't know, I think it's just such a wonderful way to be able to communicate as well, because that was the communication a lot of the time too, because not everybody, like I certainly didn't speak Georgian, none of our group did. We had one guy with us who did, and who sort of helped out every once in a while with interpreting, but actually, like, in the sort of contexts of and some of the people we met spoke English, but not everyone. Most people didn't, and of course we were in Georgia, so why should we expect anyone to speak anything but Georgian? But it was just not necessary to know how to communicate with each other with spoken language, because we were always all just singing together.
Okay, so you were engaging in song rather than with words or with
a lot of the time. Yeah, definitely. And it felt like a lot of the most meaningful encounters and conversations that we had there were through song, and it's just such a wonderful culture of generosity as well. Certainly everywhere that we went and we traveled around, so both in cities and in Lakushti, which is known as the singing village, which is up in the Svaneti Mountains, and it's a whole village where pretty much everyone is just a fantastic singer, and I don't know how many years ago, but they opened up their village to visitors, so you can travel there, and they just share their life and their culture and their singing in such a generous way with the people who visit.
So
yeah,
it's
to Georgia. Really, I really recommend it.
Go to the singing village. Yeah, I was looking at reasons why it might help us, in some sort of way we're not able to, qualify, as it were. It's been quite communal singing has been like the point of many studies, especially in recent years. So I found a few studies. I'll just say Clifton Hancock's 2001 did a study. Now, this was quite a small sample size, but essentially they were looking at choral singers and what sort of benefits they felt they were getting from it. For us who, as choral singers, we'll see that these probably sound quite familiar to us. They were saying stuff like, I feel like I have more stronger lungs now. I feel like my mood's improved. I feel like my stress has gone down. And I feel like it's giving me, stronger social and spiritual benefits, which goes hand in hand with this religious aspect that we've been talking about. There's I was reading some news a while ago. I forget what it was, but essentially some doctors were now prescribing choral singing to their patients because of all this research that's coming, because it seems to be tied to reduction in cortisol, the stress hormone. You sing together and it calms you down, kind of. It's really, really fascinating. And I think maybe kind of ancient humans, they knew this kind of instinctively. And now with the prospect of modern science, we're able to qualify why physiognomically it works. But they probably already back in ancient Greece, they knew and felt the benefits and found that doing it made them feel better. And once you're in a situation where you're feeling good around people, it probably makes you feel more connected to them. So it's really interesting. Yeah. Okay. So we've
definitely.
So we've talked a little bit about the history of singing together. Looked at how it was in ancient societies and how it's tied to religion, how that's tied to our personal experiences in Sweden, in Georgia, and how a lot of modern studies are now tying this to effects such as reduced cortisol and a greater sense of well-being. Do you have anything else that you can think of that in this field?
Well, I mean, on the note of well-being, I think there is a reason why we see so many people during this global pandemic. So many people turn to sort of ways of singing together and song and art in general. But I mean, we see all these virtual choir projects popping up. Singing on the street. I've started. I've been running for the past 6 weeks. I've been running a weekly, sing along choir on my road that we sort of communicate via WhatsApp group, and we decide on a few songs, and then I lead a sing along every week. That we just kind of getting, as I say, we get to know each other quite quickly through just doing something like that together, and everybody seems to be. I think we're all kind of a little happier for it.
Yeah,
I've certainly not gone crazy yet, which is a sign that I'm getting into singing. So,
well, it's good to hear. Yeah, it's really interesting. It'll be fascinating to see, how the field of choral music goes on with all the study coming up, and as you said, we're in the middle of a pandemic, 2020, and I don't know if you've seen, but I've read that it's very likely that choral singing in the traditional sense is still a long way off, unfortunately, because you have a lot of people squished together and all breathing at each other, and that's not good for containing disease. But it's I hope we'll be able to do it again soon, because it's it's good for you in so many ways. I think we'll
I know.
we'll have to wrap up here. So I want to say thank you to Patrick for leaving a nice comment. He says that he's missing his choirs and is very happy that we're doing this and makes him feel better. Well, thank you. I mean,
thank you, Patrick.
And should we try now? Of course, the big problem with choral singing now is that we can't really do it online. So we thought we'd have a go at singing a song together, just to see how that goes. What song should we
try? Do you actually know Helangor?
I don't actually know it. Sorry, we don't have it.
Cheater. Name a song that we know.
Ut I vår hage.
Okay.
Just do it first.
All right.
We'll just do it in unison.
Okay, fine.
1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. Ut I vår hage där växa blåbär som hjärtans frö.
Ville du mig något så träffas vi där.
Okay, so you were about. Yeah, so cool. we were about 2 bars out from each other, and this is the problem. Unfortunately.
Hey, but that's the thing, though. I was in time with you on my end. That's so weird until you stopped.
I guess probably. So you were probably
presumably because you were 2 bars out with me.
Well, I was just singing in my own tempo, and then you were getting my delayed signal, and then singing along with my delayed signal. So, but you were 2 bars after me.
Such is life.
This is
but that's fine.
Anyway,
as long as it sounds good where I am. All right.
Anyway, that will be
until next time.
That'll be it for the first episode of Scandi Pitches. Be sure to share this video with your friends if you think they'll find it useful, and we'll be back next Friday with another episode. So leave us any comments if you've got anything you want us to talk about, and enjoy your weekend.